going to do a quick example of the 1.5 quiz. And I have open here, it says, it gives us a revenue function. It says that the revenue that a company earns in dollars. So when we're doing these, units are very important when we're asked to interpret things in the context of a problem. So revenue is given in dollars. And this function here says revenue is equal to this function here, okay? So R of P means revenue is a function of P. Well, what is P? It tells us here P is the price per items in dollars per item. So if I input P, price, my output is revenue, represented by this function here. All right, so we're going to put this into Excel. We're going to create an input-output table. We're going to graph this thing. We're going to use Solver to find the horizontal intercept, and we'll walk through step by step. So it wants us to go into Excel and recreate this table down here. So it's whenever we create an input-output table, I always put the input in the first column and the output comes in one of the later columns. So here I've already started. I'm adding some description here. I said P is in column A, and I added a little bit more context. P is my input. It represents price per item. I could come up here and wrap this if I don't want the column to be so so wide. Okay. Wrap text. Okay, and if I do the same thing here, I've got my R of P, my revenue function is the output. So I input price here and I output revenue here. Okay, so I'm going to read what it says next. It says enter the value of 0 in cell A2 to start the input-output table. So here I'm going to enter 0. And I'm going to use cell referencing to write my revenue function, which is here. So this revenue is equal to, I always start a formula with an equal sign here, is equal to negative 0.95 times, where is my price, right? P squared, my price is here. Price raised to the second power, okay? Plus 437, right? I got that from here, times price is here, P. So I've used cell referencing. I'm going to hit enter, and that makes sense because I have negative 0.95 times P squared plus 437 times P. When I multiply that out, when the price is 0, the revenue is 0. So now let's see what it says next. It says make your table span from a starting value of 0 and make sure it's high enough so that I can see 2 horizontal intercepts. Now notice it didn't tell you how to step price. So I mean, I could say let me have price go by increments of $5, for instance. Okay. And I can just drag this down, and now I have price from 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way up to 85. So let's graph that. And if I want to copy this cell down, I just bring my cursor till I get that black plus sign, and I double click, and I see here, this is my revenue. All right. If I want to make the formatting so that they're all 2 decimal places, I can do that as well. All right, so let me create my smooth line graph. It says make my table span so that I can see 2 horizontal intercepts. So let me create my smooth line graph. I'm going to select this column and this column, and I'm going to insert. I come down here. I see those scatter plots, and then I'm going to select smooth line graph. Let me move this over more. So I only see one intercept. It looks like 0, 0 is a horizontal intercept, but I don't see a second one. So I haven't spanned my table far enough. All right, so I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to make my table go further. All right, I'm going to pull that down. Went down to $215. Let's see what happens when I go down to $445. Let me graph it again. I'm going to select this whole column. I need to select both column A and B. When I have a graph, the horizontal axis is represented by the inputs. The vertical axis is represented by the outputs. So if I want to graph this thing, I want to include both price and revenue. So let's see, insert. All right. Well, that looks pretty good, but I see that I still haven't gone far enough because this has not continued down to go through the horizontal axis again. So let me get rid of this graph. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to keep going further. Okay, I'm going to keep going further. I'm going to highlight those cells showing that I'm stepping by $5, and I'm going to continue on. I'm going to continue on. Okay, let's just go a little bit further. All right, and so now I need to copy down my revenue function, double click on that. All right, so let's come up here, and I'm going to graph this again. Don't be afraid to adjust your input and output table to make sure that it represents what you need. So I'm going to insert smooth line graph. All right, I went a little bit further than I needed to, and I'm intentionally doing this so you can see that I don't want you to just stick with what you have here. I want you to get a good picture. I only needed to go a little bit past for something. So let me go back. I'm going to delete this graph, right? And I didn't need to go that far. In fact, here I can see where the function equals 0. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this part of my table. And I'm going to graph it again. I'm going to insert a smooth line graph. And you see when I got rid of those extra values, I get a better looking graph, okay? So now I can clearly see it goes through the horizontal or the x-axis down here, 0, 0, and all the way somewhere over here, 400 something. All right. So now I did part D. I can clearly see the two horizontal intercepts. And so now it says one of the horizontal intercepts is at 0, 0, right? That's here, I can see it. But the function has a second horizontal intercept to the right of that. Okay, well, to the right of that, if I continue on, here's the second horizontal intercept. So then it says within my table, use solver to find the other horizontal intercept. So I know that when I have a horizontal intercept, my output or my y value is 0. We always use solver when we're given the output value and we want to solve for the input value that results in a particular output. So when I look at my table here, I want to scan down my table, and I want to do it within the table. So I want to find somewhere I can see that my output is positive, and then it goes 0 at the horizontal intercept, and then negative. So I want to sort of scan down near past 400, and I want to see, you can see my revenue is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then actually in my problem, it is equal to exactly 0. So let's say I didn't have 460 here. Let's say I had 470, 480, 490. Let's say I didn't exactly have 460 in my table. I'm going to look, and I can see here my revenue is positive, and then it goes to negative. I know that at my horizontal intercept, it's where the output is equal to 0. So I'm going to find the cell that's closest to 0. So this cell here, 2,161, is closer to 0 than negative 4,000. So I'm going to click on this cell here. And to use Solver, I'm going to go to Data. Okay, move this over. Solver. And I always clear this cell out because it can have junk in there from a prior problem. So my objective is I want this cell here, B93, to equal a value of 0. And then I want to change this cell here to give me, I want to solve for the input value that's going to give me an output value of 0. I always want to unclick this tab here, and then I'm going to click Solve. Okay, so now it has given me, I want to make that, I think that said yellow. Okay, so now I can see when I have an output of 0, or the horizontal intercept is 0, I have an input of 460. So here I would just enter 460 and 0. Okay, and then it says give me the real world contextual meaning. So I want to, when it says contextual meaning, I want to refer back to my problem, right? I want to refer to my inputs and outputs. So my input is price, okay, and my output is revenue. So if this is my input, 460, and my output is 0, I want to match it back to the problem. So what I would say here is it's not letting me enter in that box. What I would say here is that when the price is equal to $460, the revenue is $0. And so this is just when my input is 460, my output is 0. And I just want to make sure that I'm talking about, well, what is the input? In this case, my input is price, okay? And in this case, when my output is revenue. So I want to make sure that I reference the specifics of context of my problem. All right, so then the next part says, within my table, find R of 230. So this means if this thing in parentheses represents price, and so I want to find what is the revenue. I want to evaluate this function. My input is 230. I want to, depending upon how I set my table up here, I probably have 230 in my table right here. But if I didn't, let's say I had 226. Let's say I didn't go by increments in 5, and I want to find what is the revenue when the price is 230. I would come down within my table, not at the end of my table, within my table, and I would find the input that's closest to 230, okay? So I've got 226 and 225. I'm just going to put an input of 230 in. And because I've had my formula here, it's going to give me the revenue, right? So in this case, when I input 230, right, I'm going to highlight this in green. Okay, so this says when the price is equal to $230 per item, then the revenue is $50,255. That is how I express it in context. All right, so then it says identify the real world domain in context. All right, so domain is all the valid inputs for my function. And in this case, my input is price. So what is realistically the valid prices that I would have? Well, I can have a price 0, all right? So I can say price can be equal to 0. So I could have 0 is my lowest price. I'm not going to have a negative price. So even though I can input negative numbers into this function mathematically, because I'm dealing with price, I'm not going to have a negative price. All right? And so then if I look here contextually, well, I'm not going to charge, if I charge more than $460 per item, I start to have negative revenue or a loss. So realistically, I'm not going to charge more than $460 because then I would lose money. So I would say that my upper end of my price would be $460. So here I would say $460, and this would say price can be from $0 up to $460. And then for my range, I'm going to say range represents all the valid outputs. All right. So when I do my range, I want to start with my domain. I want to find the y value that goes with an input of 0. Well, so then the smallest here, right? If my price is 0, my revenue is 0. So the smallest value in my range of revenue is 0. Okay? If my price is 0, my revenue is 0. All right. So then I want to look at, well, what is the maximum? What is the maximum revenue? So the minimum revenue is 0 here and here. But what is my maximum? Okay. So okay, here. So here it wants to know at 230, right? The maximum is 50,255. We already did that in this last problem here. All right, so that's the biggest output I get. It's right up here on the function here, right? That's the maximum revenue is 50,255. And this says the revenue can be from $0 up to 50,255. Now I'm going to save my file. All right. I'm going to do File, Save As, and I'm going to save it to my hard drive. Beth Excel 1. I'm going to save, and then when I come down here, which I can't submit it anymore because the date is passed, I would use the paper clip. Use the paper clip to attach the file here. So I'm going to attach that file. I'm going to look on my hard drive and attach it into Lumen.